Today we have our guest, John Tessitore. He was diagnosed with OCD. He runs the JCK Foundation, and he was friend to John C. Kelly. Welcome, John, to this podcast.
Oh, Winston, thanks for having me, man. Thanks for all the work you're doing. This is really, really cool. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. So our first segment would be your story. Mental health is a very serious issue currently. People in the past didn't really have much knowledge of it. People now don't even have much knowledge of it. So how did you first get into the sort of mental health world?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And so it's interesting. So for me, it's a topic that just hits home very, very deeply. When I was in middle school, is when I really started to first struggle with my own intrusive thoughts and my OCD. So I actually, I grew up in a relatively religious family, and I would have to say my nightly prayers. And I remember there was just one night where I couldn't stop saying the prayers. I kept thinking if I say these prayers the wrong way, my mom is going to be possessed by the devil and it's all my fault. And I was like, wait, what? Because I knew deep down that the thoughts, they weren't rational, but I still couldn't control them, and I found myself staying up till 12, 1, 2, sometimes even 3 in the morning, just saying these prayers over and over again because I didn't want any of the people I loved to be harmed. And, I remember in middle school is when it all really started, because when I had these thoughts, I always tell the students when I present, it's like, the hardest part wasn't just having to kind of hide these thoughts or to have to deal with these thoughts, but was really hiding them from you, from my friends, from the kids in my grade. I felt like if any of my buddies knew this, and this was about 20 years ago now when I was in 7th grade, I felt like if any of my buddies knew this, they would look at me differently. They would think I was weird or weak, and they wouldn't want to hang out with me. So I started coping in some really negative ways, and I found myself, I would do anything to get attention, because I felt like if my friends were laughing at me and they thought I was this clown, they would see right through the pain and they'd have no idea what I was actually struggling with. And it got me into some tough situations, and it's pretty interesting, Winston. I went to the principal's office 155 times in 180 days when I was in 7th grade, and I always say it wasn't because I was this bad kid who wanted to make problems, but I just had no idea how to control these thoughts, and I would just do anything to get attention, and it was a really lonely time in my life. But that's where John Kelly, JCK, who the foundation was started in honor of, came into play. So, John and my older brother were best friends. So I grew up in a very small town in Westchester, New York. It's called Dobbs Ferry. We had about 80 kids or so in each grade. And, I'd known John ever since I was about 2. And I'll never forget, John comes up to me. We always had this really special bond because him and my brother were really close. And we always just were similar. I always admired him. We went on family vacations together. And he was the type of guy that would do anything to make people feel comfortable. And in hindsight, I think he did that because he didn't want anyone else to feel pain, because he knew what it was like to feel isolated and to feel that struggle. And we're at this family barbecue, and he comes up to me with this big grin on his face, and he looks at me, and he just simply goes, dude, I hear you have OCD. And I was like, wait, what? Like who told you this? And he goes, dude, like our parents talk. And I was like, but why did my mom tell you this? No one's supposed to know this. It's supposed to be this big secret. And he goes, John, man, relax, dude. I'm here to let you know that I have OCD too. I'm going to help you get through this. And I remember my jaw dropped to the floor. And I remember looking at him. I was like, wait, you have these thoughts about like the devil possessing your mom? And he goes, dude, all the time. And he gives me this big high five and this big hug. And I think what was so special about that, and I always talk about this, with anyone I can, is, not only was that the first time that I was meeting someone else who had the same struggle I had, but it was John Kelly. It was this guy that I've admired ever since I was a child. And, this guy I really admired the most. And when he's telling me that he had the same thoughts I had, and you could live a happy and healthy life even while struggling with this, that meant everything to me. And that was the first time I ever felt like I could be myself. And, I always tell the students when we present, or the parents, whoever we present to, because I really mean this from the bottom of my heart, and it's to never underestimate the impact that one person can have. Because the truth is, Winston, if John didn't come up to me at that family barbecue that day, 21 years ago now, there's no way I'd be here right now, and that would crush me, because I wouldn't be able to have these conversations, and all it took was one person really just going out of his way to make someone feel comfortable about who they were, and that conversation that I had 21 years ago not only changed my life, but if you think about it, it changed everyone's life that I met, and it's a wild chain effect. So it's to say I'm passionate about this would be would be an understatement. But that's kind of how I got into it. And just to kind of add on to it, after we lost John, so unfortunately, John did lose his battle to OCD and depression when he was 24, and unfortunately, he died by suicide. And it's going on 13 years now later this month, and it's always going to crush me. But I will say I really feel John more and more every day, especially in the students. And I always say, every time you go out of your way to make someone else feel a little bit better about who they are and what they're going through, and every time we're just being a little bit more open about who we are, what we might be going through, not only are you keeping John's legacy alive, but you're genuinely making this world better. And after I graduated college, I studied television and journalism. So I thought I was going to go into sports TV, and that's what I did. But, John passed away my junior year. And when that happened, I made a promise to myself. I was like, I'm going to do whatever I can to keep John's legacy alive. And, I made a documentary about John my senior year. And that documentary actually ended up, doing really well. And it won our school film festival. And I got to show it at a bunch of colleges and share a little bit of my own story. And, once I saw kind of how much this was needed and how many other people were going through similar thoughts and just needed some relatability in a sense, right? I said,
Yeah.
this is what I really, really want to do. And that's when I decided I'm going to go into the foundation full time. And now I've been doing it full time for about, like, officially almost 6 years now. So.
Wow. And this is actually the perfect podcast for me because my entire family almost has struggled with OCD to some extent. My dad is OCD about like organizing his documents. If he doesn't get that done, he can't sleep, and he takes like constant naps during the day. He's not happy at all. And my grandmother, on my mom's side, she is OCD about cleaning, like cleaning the floor, and she's like 80 something, 70 something now, and she's still cleaning the floor, everything around her, surroundings, everything, because she's so afraid that touching anything or making anything not clean would result in someone dying. Because her family, like, they grew up way in early 1900s, right? And dealing with all these different types of bacteria and different pollutants and everything in those times, it was it was a very bad environment to sort of not clean. So every time she goes to a restaurant, every time she goes to someone else's house, she would just start cleaning. That's the first thing she does. And yeah, that's just what OCD sort of does to some of these people. And it isn't taken as seriously because people think, oh, it's just organizing, it's just some sort of focus. So what would you say to these people who don't know what OCD is? What is OCD?
Well, Winston, thank you so much for sharing that, because that means the world to me, to know how much this means to you. And like you said it best. It's people don't understand, how life controlling this can be. Like you were saying, a lot of people think, oh, I have to keep this clean. And like you said, it's such a different, it goes so much deeper than that. And like for me, like the best way I can describe like OCD is it's almost like this like tidal wave, right? It's like you think that, when you think that everything's okay, all of a sudden this tidal wave comes and hits you, and everything that you think is good is scattered, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, everything is gonna disappear in my life, and then slowly but surely the tidal wave goes away, and you actually realize that you're safe. But when you're in it, it feels very, very much like hell at times, and uncontrollable. And I guess how I would describe OCD too is, it's for me, it's basically, I would think that if I didn't do something a certain way, something horrible would happen to someone that I love. So if I didn't touch my nose when I was a kid a certain amount of times before I got up to bat in baseball, I'd either get hit in the eye with the pitch, or I would hit a line drive and hit the pitcher, right? Or, if I didn't say those nightly prayers, my mom was going to go to hell and my sister was going to die. And I mean, like, again, it's just these horrible thoughts, right? It even is hard to say out loud, but the reason I say it out loud is because, it's a way to challenge it and say, no, I'm going to stand up to this OCD, because I know it's the intrusive thoughts trying to bring us down. And I've often noticed that OCD usually attacks like the kindest people. It's because you so badly don't want something bad to happen to someone that, we sometimes lose control, and we try to do whatever we can to make people feel good. And I also call it like the doubter's disease in a sense. So it's so interesting that you say that, Winston, too. And I love that you brought that up because I think it's one of the most stigmatized mental illnesses in the world, especially people who don't have direct experience. I remember sometimes I'll just be talking to friends, and I don't always tell people exactly what I do. Sometimes I'll just be, whether I'm at like the park or at a baseball game or just meeting someone for the first time, and I'll tell them a little bit about OCD, and sometimes they'll say, they'll have the complete wrong idea of it. It's really something that can control our lives. And I think the best way to counteract it is exactly what you did right there, Winston. Is you were honest about it, you talked about it, and it helps me because when I realize that, okay, I know these are my intrusive thoughts, right? I know I'm not a bad person. I know that I'm not a failure if I don't do this certain thing. I try to speak it out loud to the right people in my life, and I go to a therapist that really helps me with it. I'm really open now over the last 12 or 13 years, especially since after John passed away, about when I'm starting to feel the OCD take over. But it's hard because when you're in it, right, as you know, just from your own experiences with it sometimes feels really hard to get out of. But that's why I think the biggest thing is when you're feeling it, talk about it with the right people, and don't beat yourself up for it. Don't judge yourself for having the thoughts, because when you start judging yourself for the thoughts, then you start to believe, oh, maybe I am a bad person, when it couldn't be the furthest thing from the truth. And for me, when I've been able to kind of accept the thoughts, okay, this is my OCD speaking to me, it makes it a little bit easier to move forward. And I always tell the students, whether it's OCD, depression, or whatever, or anxiety, bipolar, whatever you might be struggling with, no thought is too dark to share. Because oftentimes the people that we love the most and the people that we admire the most are going through similar thoughts as us. And when we're able to express these things, we're able to just handle it with a little bit more confidence and realize, hey, we're not alone. There's nothing wrong with us. We're all going through this journey together. So that thanks for asking that. And thanks for sharing, Winston, because you described it perfectly, but I'm glad that I can add my own little take on it as well.
Yeah, of course. And my grandmother on my dad's side actually, she has OCD with different things. I'm not sure what her exact thing is, but she's very religious. And I think a lot of times my cousins and I sort of misunderstand her for what she does usually, because she'll be so, uh, trapped into religion, sort of like praying every night, watching. The only thing she watches is really just religious stuff. She doesn't go out of the way to it, doing much else. And she thinks that if I listen to sort of any like rock music or pop music or modern day music of any sorts, that the devil will sort of possess me, because she thinks that pop music currently is like sort of the devil's song. Bunch of this bad things will happen to the family if people just start listening to this type of music. So yeah, I think people are misunderstood. What's your take on people being misunderstood? And
Well, I think the hardest thing with people being misunderstood too is like you said, you had a great description of it, and I think what's so impressive about how you described it too is having the empathy on your end, almost to know, okay, I know that she's not trying to, kind of harm us, but at the same time, it's like, this, I know that this is the OCD in a sense, right? I think a lot of times, like the misunderstanding can be really frustrating for people going through it, but also can be very frustrating for family members, friends, sometimes dealing with it, because I think the hardest part is trying to communicate what's going on, right? So like I think too, like when you're having these thoughts too, so it's this mix, right? I'm lucky that I'm open about my OCD, right? And I know that when it's coming, I can have that conversation. But there's a lot of people that don't have the resources and don't necessarily have, the relationships or the knowledge or even their own kind of like admittance of what they're feeling. You know what I mean? So I think I think the biggest part about being misunderstood is a lot of it takes patience, right? Patience and time. And we tell this to parents all the time too, and students who, have parents who are struggling, right? It's like the biggest thing to trying to get to people to understand some of these thoughts that are really hard, right, is trying to have these conversations in empathetic environments where it doesn't turn into an argument. Because sometimes if you approach someone, hey, I noticed that, even if like you approach someone and you're like, hey, I noticed that your OCD has been acting up, like what's going on? Someone's going to probably back up and be like, what do you mean it's not acting up? But when you're like, hey, I just want to let you know, like, I love you and I care about you. And anytime that you want to talk about what's going on, I'm always here for you. And I think when you're able to kind of slowly make people feel better, a lot of it is like the tone too when it comes to these conversations. So a lot of it is when you kind of have that tone of kind of welcomeness and saying, hey, all right, like, understanding, hey, my grandma's from a different generation, and understanding that we're all from, the way that we're all from different different times and have different experiences that kind of shaped our early lives. And when you're able to kind of understand where people are coming from, right, it becomes a little bit easier to understand the OCD. Because I know in my grandparents' generation, and where even though we're a couple years apart, our grandparents are probably relatively close to the same age, right? No one was talking about it. So even being able to, like, in your mind, even being able to bring up mental health sometimes in that generation and goes, wait, we can't talk about this, and it's not their fault. It's just how things were back then. So I think that with being misunderstood with OCD too, it's trying to understand that when someone is going through OCD, it's something that really, really can control their life. And it's something that is so hard to deal with because you're having like four conversations at once, right? You're having the conversation with your OCD, trying to kind of manage it and feel a little bit better about some of these tougher thoughts that are going on in your head. Then you're having the conversation with the person in front of you while thinking about the next thing, while trying to kind of, do these compulsions, while also trying to say, no, I don't want to do these compulsions so I could challenge my OCD. So I think that's the biggest thing, is understanding that there's a lot of different things going on in someone's mind who is struggling. And a lot of times, it's because they want people to be doing well and to feel good. And I think that's the biggest, misunderstanding is, and the thing that helped me the most is, one of the most important things for someone with struggling with OCD to understand is, you are not a bad person at all for these thoughts. In fact, it's the complete opposite. You're actually, a brilliant person, a compassionate person, and a really kind person. So it's just trying to like mitigate those arguments and stuff, right? And trying to figure out, okay, if I know where this is coming from, and that's why I give you so much credit, even like knowing in a sense where it's coming from, being able to slow down and trying to meet that person who's struggling where they're at instead of projecting in a sense. So it's a great question.
Yeah, and that's like a very, very important thing, right? With trying to understand people's perspective on other parts, because you could, for me at least, I kind of go to school, and I see all these people who are being happy, and I misunderstood that sometimes they might not be happy. On the surface, they're talking to their friends and stuff, but something might be going on in their life. So that's you know, the human condition, which is just trying to find, you know, perfection in many people, and then knowing that you yourself are not as perfect, and other people aren't perfect, and that is the best perspective I think people can have. So, for me, I have anxiety, and my friends can't see that, but I'm I have anxiety with like social interactions, more with my friends, which is very weird. People expect you to be sort of more anxious around strangers and more so than your friends. But I just feel like I'll just disappoint my friends at some point because I'm not as great as them. All of them are so smart. All of them have so many things going on in their life, and I just think, why don't I have something going on? So I usually doubt myself, even with like this podcast. I'm starting a podcast, I have a club, I have a business, I have so many things going on. Yeah, I still doubt myself. So what do you think is a common cause for anxiety? Because my cause was very different from other people, but there could be different causes, right?
Well, Winston, something that, first of all, you were doing such an amazing job with this podcast. And so it's so amazing sometimes how often the people who are doing such amazing things for the world, we always see the negative, and we always find ourselves comparing ourselves to other people. And that kind of goes to, at least for me, right, the cause of my anxiety a lot was comparison, right? I would always find myself trying to figure out, okay, well, if I get this grade and my buddy gets this, they're already ahead of me. And then I would feel guilty for feeling that way because I want my friend to do good, but I'm sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, like what did I could have done better. I could have done this. I could have done that. It's very hard, especially when you're in high school and especially when you're in college. And even now for me as a 34-year-old, I'll find myself comparing myself to other people all the time. But when I take a step back and I try to say, okay, let me trust my values and let me trust what I believe in and my intuition. And when I'm doing things kind of out of the purity of my heart and things that feel right, it allows my anxiety to be a little bit more at ease because I'm like, you know what, I'm going for it in a sense. And it's definitely not an end all be all cure, as we know with mental health. It's not linear, right? There's some days where we feel amazing. There's some days where we feel horrible, and some days where we feel totally in between. And I think a lot of times too is, at least for me, and anxiety has obviously a lot of different causes for a lot of people. Some of it is is generational. Some of it runs in our family, some of it is caused by things that just happen to us in life, and some of it, like you were saying, is it comes from comparison or just looking around and saying, oh, I'm not doing enough, I'm not doing enough. And when I try my best, it was interesting. I'll tell you a little story because it kind of helps answer this question. I was given a presentation at a school upstate New York this week, and I love it up there. It's like I feel at peace. I'm the type. I'm not really a city person. I'm more of like a. I love being in the country. I love it. It's just peaceful. I love nature, and so when I'm up there, I'm like in heaven. I'm loving it because it's it's such a great place. I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm having amazing conversations with kids and faculty, and then my anxiety starts to creep up because it's like, well, what if you never get a presentation again? What if this is your last presentation ever? I'm like, John, stop. You know what I mean? And I know it's creeping up. So what I try to do when I feel it is I say, okay, it's going to be here no matter what. It's going to try to tell me that I'm not doing enough. It's going to try to make me compulsively email 100 schools to try to get another presentation. But at the same time, it's like, hey, John, just do your best to enjoy what's in front of you. And when you do that, things do start to add up, but it's really hard in the moment. And that's why, Winston, I'm really proud of you for even sharing that, and so proud of you for doing this, because it's a way to give people a platform, and it's also a way to deal with our own anxiety. And I think too, like you said, like the human condition is so, and I love that that was like a question too. It's just, it's the human condition is so deep but so simple. It's like the deepest thing in the world, but like for me, I'm at my happiest when I'm trying my best, and I don't always succeed in this, but when I'm trying my best to just trust my intuition and just trying to do the right thing every day. And I find myself, my anxiety starts to bottle up when I go away from my values in a sense, and when I'm surrounding myself with people that aren't, that don't make me feel as good as I know that I want to be. And that's one of the most challenging things though, is it's this battle of like trusting what you not want to do and you need to do, and then listening to the outside voice of saying, well, can I start a foundation? Can it be successful? Can I help people? Or do I have to work in business? Do I have to do this? And I'm sure you have those internal struggles every day. I think the best advice I could give to anyone struggling with that is trust what you want to do. When you're doing the things that you're passionate about, it all ends up working out, right? That's not to say stop doing all the normal things and stop doing the things that sometimes that we have to do. But it's one of those things to keep in mind as you're moving forward. You're gonna, and especially you, Winston, and all your friends, you guys are gonna do amazing. And just yeah, I feel very passionate about what you do, and yeah, just to kind of round that point up, I'm very proud of you.
Yeah, thank you. And you saying trust your values, I think that's very good advice because for me, with anxiety, how I deal with it is, I'm doing everything for one goal, which is to sort of honor my great grandmother who died sadly a year or 2 years ago. She was the most authentic person I could ever meet. She was always smiling. She loved to see me eat. She was the best person you could be around. And it's sad to see that some people just struggle to be their authentic selves because being authentic can actually make you happier. It doesn't have to be something you're very ashamed about, because being authentic means being yourself, and being yourself makes you happy. If you're happy, you can make other people happy. So why do you think people struggle so much with being authentic, be themselves?
Winston, that's one of the best ways anyone has ever put it to me. And I've been doing this for a long time now at a lot of different schools, meeting a lot of students, and the way that you brought up, first of all, your grandma is definitely, I know she's so proud of you because you are being your authentic self. And that I love that you brought that up, because every time that I go to a place, wherever I am, I always think the biggest gift you can give to this world, and I'll say this in presentations, is the gift of being authentically who you are. And you summed it up. You said, because when you're being yourself, not only is it helping you, but it gives everyone else around you the courage to be themselves, right? Because when we're authentic about the ups and the downs, and when we're talking a little bit sometimes about the downs, it makes those other people feel comfortable, and you could build those real relationships that last and that give us so much meaning. I think that people struggle, with being authentic so much is because I think there's two things, right? I think a lot of times, especially, I see a lot of times like in sixth grade. So put it this way, right? Like we'll give presentations a lot from grades 6 through college, right? sixth grade, you see the kids are usually never afraid to be themselves. It's kind of like I don't want to say the last year of authenticity, because there are plenty of middle schoolers and high schoolers that are able to do it. But the last year of where you see a lot of people fully being able to kind of be themselves. I think what happens a lot of times too is what makes it so hard is, you know, I think a lot of it is the external stuff that happens with other people. It's like, okay, well, if my best friend is doing this and I'm not doing this, and I have to kind of fit in a sense. I think people really try to do at times, instead of being themselves, they think of, okay, what can I do to make sure I'm not left out from this group? Because a lot of times, once one person starts changing and not being their authentic self, sometimes other people kind of follow that and feel like they have to do it because this is the way things have been done in a sense. And then sometimes you find yourself struggling because it's like, well, my friends are doing this, but I just still want to do my thing, and I still want to be friends with you guys, but you're not really letting me do my thing. I think there's like a fear too of being perceived sometimes, and as messed as like, and it breaks my heart that people think this, but sometimes people be like, oh, if they're not following the grain, they're weird, or they're doing something different, and oh man, they're really out there, and that couldn't be the furthest thing from the truth. But I think a lot of people get that fear of almost being labeled as someone that no one's going to hang out with because they're being different, when the irony of it is, when you are being authentic, people want to hang out with you more. You just don't really realize it, and you start separating yourself from the people that aren't being authentic. And then those people, I always say it to this guy, I see it all the time, those people who can't be their authentic selves, they eventually come back and start feeling comfortable with you because they're going through it themselves. It's almost like you have your guard up. It's like it's really like a coping mechanism in a sense, right? Because if I'm vulnerable, I'm afraid that someone's going to take that vulnerability and really hurt me. So I might as well kind of cover it up in a sense, and follow what everyone else is doing. When the irony of it is, when you're vulnerable, even though you may get hurt, a lot of times you're also going to be able to realize the people that really appreciate you. And even like you doing this podcast, when people listen to this, I guarantee you some of your classmates are going to be like, whoa, like I want to be more like Winston because he has the courage to be himself. I think that's a big thing. And I also think another thing is sometimes the pressure that we get from the adults in our life, right? And it's not the adult's fault, but sometimes parents, they really want you to succeed in a sense. And sometimes their idea of success, in our minds isn't always what we think it is in a sense. Sometimes it's like, well, I have to get this job, and if I don't get this job or go to this school, then I'm going to be letting my parents down. When the truth is, even though you might think that, you're not going to be letting your parents down when you're being happy. At least from what I've talked to a lot of parents, and again, every parent is different, but most parents just want their child to be happy. And a lot of times, though, it's that fear because they just want you to be happy so much that sometimes they'll say, oh, well, to be happy, you have to get this grade or go to this school. And it's all well intended. It's coming from such a place of love, but sometimes it can feel really overwhelming. And that pressure can consume a child at times. And a lot of times it's that perceived pressure. And we talk about it with the parents all the time. It's like, hey, when we give our parent workshops, we're like, hey, try your very best to get to know what your child really genuinely likes, because when you can kind of have those empathetic conversations, you're able to kind of meet in the middle and say, hey, I want you to try your best to do well in school, but I want to make sure that you're happy and you're not overwhelming yourself with things that aren't making you happy. So I think that also is a piece of it. And I think authenticity is the most beautiful gift you can give to the world. And I think I see it a lot as people get older, that it becomes a little bit easier. And then the other thing is, I think sometimes there's that fear of the letdown, right? The fear almost of failure. If I'm going to go all out and be myself, what if I do fail? And sometimes people just never try, and it's heartbreaking because, I don't have any stats or data on this, but I could almost guarantee that when you're doing things that matter to you and when you're being yourself, right, things do work out, and people will respect you even more, even if there's some bumps and bruises along the way.
Yeah, and I am actually currently reading a book. It's called The Unsold Mindset. It is a very great book. And I think one very important advice I could give to people from this book is to be intentionally ignorant, which means to sort of avoid anything that might damage yourself, your own values. Because, taking in other people's sort of judgments of you, or the fear of having these judgments of you, it will only lead you to not be your authentic selves, right? To not talk about your own self and the good values of who is, yourself. Mm-hmm. So, for many people, I feel like the best way to do this would be through finding some sort of hobby, even when their value gets lost, when their main goal gets lost. Find a hobby that gets you back on track. Um, what would your advice be on this sort of question? What do you think works for you that sort of helped you get back on track when you're sort of lost?
Wow, I love that. Well, it's interesting. It was almost exactly what you did, Winston, what you just said there. So when I was kind of at some of my deeper struggles, I also struggle a bit with addiction, and I remember I tried to go back to what made me happy when I was like in middle school and early high school. When I was just like feeling pure, so to speak, and I always loved high school sports. It was something that I loved. I used to broadcast; it was my thing. And something that really, really helped me kind of remember who I was too is like I started getting into coaching, right? So I started coaching at first middle school sports, and then it went really well because you're able to meet these kids in like seventh and eighth grade, and you're able to help them, and you're able to build their self-esteem. And then once I saw myself kind of building their self-esteem and getting to know these kids, and I loved it. That really was such a hobby that allowed me to kind of still kind of compete in the sports world in a sense, while also being able to fill up my time that used to be filled with some of the negative thoughts or the doubting thoughts. And I think being able to not only get a hobby but also just like try your best. So this is something that some students have done, and it's like try your best if you're really overwhelmed, right? Or if you're struggling to be who you are, if you're struggling, go into your room or wherever you feel safe, whether it's outside in your room, put on your favorite song for like a half hour, right? And then write down whatever comes to your mind and what gives you relief. Try your best not to think about anything going on during the day. Try to think about what gives you relief, right? And I remember like for me, again, like what would always give me relief was sometimes just thinking about memories when I was a kid in upstate New York. So I was like, man, I want to go back upstate New York. And now, ironically, like I didn't even realize how now I'm presenting there, and I feel I'm doing what I love in a place I love. You know what I mean? So it's something I think too. Like write down those things that mean a lot to you. And for me, because I think our brains can move so fast. Like for me, I have such an overactive brain. For me, I used to think it's a blessing and a curse. I think it's way more of a blessing because I'm able to kind of tame it in a sense now. And what I like to do, what really helps me is I'll sometimes when I get so busy during the day, right, and I have all these things to do. I know like for a student, for example, you might have a sport that you have to do. You might have, you have to study. You have friendships. You have so many different things coming at you during the day. Like, students a lot of times are even more busy than adults. And something that I do when I go during these busy days is no matter what, I'll listen to my favorite songs for about 20 minutes and I'll go on the Stairmaster, which is like my way of meditating, and all my like dreams, like the things that I really want to do, not that I just have to do during the day, start to pop into my head. And I'm like, whoa, that would be cool if I did this. And then I'll try to like figure, okay, if I want to do this, like maybe I should do a little bit more of this during my free time, and being okay saying, hey, maybe I can't do this now. Maybe I'm overwhelmed right now, but wow, this is what I really want deep down. And then not beating yourself up for not being able to do it at times, right? I think a lot of us don't get started because we're so afraid of not being able to do this, or, oh, I have this regret because the last 4 years I did this and I wasn't focusing on this one thing that I love. That's completely fine. Like we're humans. It's going to happen, right? There's going to be there's always going to be stuff that we regret, right? And then just kind of continuing to trust, okay, here's what I want to do. Let me try to do this today. Because then it helps you kind of get back to what means a lot to you and trusting your intuition. So trying to find, even if it's a half hour that is just for you in a day, can really, really help you get back, I think, to that healthier place, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think music is very important for trying to do this. A lot of people, music is one thing that everyone has in common. Everyone loves to listen to some sort of music, and I feel like it's some sort of way that relaxes your mind. And yeah, for my grandmother, like I said, she listens to religious music, but that helps her. So it's really great that this is very good advice from you.
Thank you.
And I just want to know how are you currently doing? How's your current life? What's going on? What's happy? It's spring out, and it's great weather. Maybe not so much for me because I have pollen allergies. So
Oh boy, so
it's
you're starting to feel a little bit.
it's like walking to a black pepper apocalypse. It's ridiculous. So how is your life going so far?
That's an amazing question, and first of all, thank you for asking, because it means a lot to me. Right now, currently, thankfully, I would say I'm doing really well. There's a lot of ups and downs. I think the reason I'm doing a lot better these last couple of months is because I'm starting to make a little bit more time for myself and starting to set some certain boundaries in my life that really help me kind of being able to allow myself to do things that I love, allow myself to see people that I love and not get so consumed. Because my problem, my blessing and my curse is like I would do like I'm so mission driven. Like my life is my mission in a sense, right? So like my work is my life, if that makes sense, right? So it's like so, but it's also at the same time like saying, okay, finding those times to get a little bit of a break, to take a walk, to see like I'm gonna go see my parents later. I'm gonna go see a really good family friend later too, and finding that time to just balance things out. So currently, I am doing I will say I'm doing well, but there are plenty of times where I'll be doing well one day, and then some days are a struggle, and usually the struggle comes from being a bit overwhelmed or too many things getting thrown at me, or sometimes just like situations in my life that just feel like like I'm trying my best to be myself, but this person isn't letting me be myself at times, right? But I will say the OCD is doing it's in a good place right now, right? Because again, I'm able to be open about it and I'm able to talk about it a lot more. And I'm also I'm getting a little bit more mental rest, which is allowing me to give better presentations and to do my mission better, so to speak. So currently, right now, I'm doing really well. I have a little bit more downtime in the spring because I don't coach a sport in the spring, which again is just kind of helping me kind of clear my mind a little bit and start thinking about some of the more creative things that I like to do as well. So currently, right now, I'm luckily I'm doing well. But again, I there and I think why I'm doing well is because I'm able to be open when I'm not feeling well. And even on days where I don't feel well, it's not like a disaster anymore. If that makes sense, right? Sometimes I'd be like, how am I feeling bad again, right? And I'd be like, hey, it's John, it's natural. Like this is gonna happen. So I'm doing well. I'm feeling a little bit less overwhelmed, which is good. I still feel overwhelmed because that's how my mind works. I take on a lot of different things because I love to take on a lot of different things. But yeah, I'm happy. I'm feeling really grateful, especially to do the work that we do and to be able to get on podcasts like this and have conversations with students like you who are literally changing the world. So thankfully, right now I'm doing well. But how about you, Winston? Are you feeling? Is this a good time? Well, I know it's an interesting time of year because with the pollen, but how are you doing?
Well, I'm doing all right. Trying to get myself back on track with grades and stuff. Otherwise, doing pretty good. I've been trying to make new friends, open my mindset better. After reading the book, I realized I had to look back on myself, find some way that I could be myself happier. Taking this advice to the heart and trying to just enjoy the world as it is. It's a great time to be alive. New technology, everything is going on. Thank you so much for being on. Do you have any final pieces of advice, jokes, maybe?
The final thing I'll say, well, first of all, Winston, just like keep doing what you're doing. That's one of the most important things I want to say because the world needs more people like you that have the courage to be themselves. And with that being said, if anyone out there listening is struggling right now, try your best not to beat yourself up and understand that you are an incredible person. When times do get low, it's okay. Try your best to talk about it and understand that you're not alone, and I'm always here if you ever need any help along the way. Because everyone has a story. I think that's the biggest thing I learned. Winston was like you said it earlier too. People might be walking around with the biggest smiles on their face. They might be going through some of the deepest struggles. And I think when we go into every day realizing that everyone has a story, it allows us to kind of live with a little bit more empathy and peace. And I think that that's another thing that I'll say is just try our best. And when we find ourselves getting angry, it's okay to be angry. Let yourself feel the emotions. Never suppress that. But then after you feel it, kind of say, okay, what can I do to maybe make this person's life better and to make my life better? So just keep being yourself, Winston. That's the most important thing I want to say. And on those days where you feel like you can't or you haven't, don't try your best not to beat yourself up. All right, that's the most important thing. And understand that you are doing an amazing thing. And wherever you end up going to school, whatever you end up doing in this world, whoever is around you is very lucky to be around you. And I know that John Kelly and your great grandma are very proud of both of us. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you for talking to me. It's been helping me as well, trying to talk to newer people, trying to develop myself as well. So this has been a great thing for me. Thank you everybody for listening. This has been Mental Medicine. Have a great day.